The following segment is brought to you in partnership with Future 42. Turn your frustration into action by signing up at future42.org. Seattle is a progressive city, right? So what would happen, do you think, if hundreds or thousands of people of color gathered together to protest because they don't feel safe? Would the media cover it? Would politicians be there? What do you think would happen? 1,000 people of color come together peacefully to try to send a message to the city that they don't feel safe. Well, we know it would happen, right? Because we saw it all throughout 2020. We saw large protests and gatherings, some of them peaceful, some of them not peaceful, after the murder of George Floyd. Now, I would say that actually most of those crowds were majority white, but they were advocating on behalf of people of color, saying that they were concerned about police brutality. And what happened? The media covered it wall to wall. Wall to wall. I mean, I was part of it. The media covered those protests wall to wall. You had members of the Seattle City Council who showed up at those demonstrations. You had the mayor of the city of Seattle who invited those protesters to City Hall to have meetings, who spoke to them on the steps of City Hall. So we know what would happen in the city of Seattle if there was a crowd of 100 or 200 or 1,000 people of color demanding change. So why then have we heard so little about a protest that happened last week involving about 1,000 members of the Asian American community in Seattle? One of the only journalists who were present for that protest was our friend Jonathan Choe, a former TV reporter in Seattle, now an independent journalist and senior fellow at the Discovery Institute, who's been covering issues of homelessness. Here's some of the clips that he gathered while he was at this protest in the International District.
So all we're asking for is we need to be heard. Officials are quick to do photo opportunities in our neighborhood when they're running for election. But when we need their help, they're nowhere to be found.
If those lawmakers cannot representing us, let us vote them out.
Now, there were a few other very small stories in the news about it, short stories on one of the evening newscasts, but there were TV stations that didn't even bother attending. Again, highly unusual in a city like Seattle that pays so much attention to other protests where you have people of color who are demanding that the city do better. So what was so different about this one? Well, in this case, you had Asian Americans who were protesting over a homeless complex that King County is trying to push through near their neighborhood. They're protesting because they say that they haven't been consulted about it in any meaningful way, and they're concerned that it could lead to an increase in crime in the International District, a neighborhood that's already been dealing with crime in a really serious way.
I wish the decision makers were here, because this is what I want to say to them. How dare you schedule a homeless shelter in our neighborhood?
So again, the concern is that this could bring an element of crime to the International District when they're already dealing with this. And they're saying, look, the city and the county are just pushing this through and they haven't consulted with us. We don't know what their plan is to deal with crime. And it's not my opinion that the county is trying to push this through. The county has said during a recent county council meeting that they're trying to push this forward as quickly as possible. So quickly, in fact, that they want to bypass a competitive bidding process.
And as we look at the unhoused population and our need to rapidly get that done, we see that as being the justification under the code.
To hear more about the concerns that this community is raising over this homeless complex and what seems like the refusal of elected leaders in a progressive city to listen to a community of color that has valid concerns over safety, I spoke to my friend Jonathan Choe about what he saw and what he heard. Jonathan Choe, welcome back to Undivided. You've been busy.
Always.
So tell me about, first and foremost, the homeless complex, quote unquote, that the International District residents are protesting against. What is it?
Okay. So this homeless megaplex being pushed by King County Executive Dow Constantine is his project. It'll be 500 beds essentially on this property in Soto at the corner of 6th and Airport Way. It's going to be leased for several years, but 500 beds, which includes RVs. These are it's going to be an RV lot. It's also going to have tiny homes. It's going to have a sobering center. It's going to have places for the homeless to get help for drug addiction. So all of this is being placed in the Soto neighborhood, which is known as an industrial district. Problem for Chinatown is that it's literally 1 block away from the border of Chinatown, directly from the Uwajimaya grocery store, which I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers have been to in Chinatown when they've passed through. And the concern now is, with all the problems that comes along with a homeless encampment or homeless communities, that's going to start pouring into Chinatown. And there's really no public safety plan at all, and very few details released by Dow Constantine. I want to say, for the record, this past March, Dow announced this quietly in a release on the King County website. And just a few weeks ago, Chinatown heard about it for the first time.
So the complex itself sounds to me like it should be non-controversial. We need people off the streets. We need them to go somewhere where they can get help. And this has all that, right? The issue, it sounds like, is the lack of communication and the lack of a plan to deal with public safety.
Yeah. Also lack of community input. But you're absolutely right. And the Chinatown activists and the vast majority in this community say, no doubt that the homeless need a facility like this, but they don't want another one in the CID. And that's one of the biggest problems. The Chinatown activists are saying right now that they are shouldering unfairly this homeless burden, because Chinatown already has the navigation center, which is a open, safe drug injection site. And that's caused so many problems over the years. And that's another facility that came in without input into the Chinatown neighborhood. So it's almost like history repeating itself. And the Chinatown activists will also cite that there are at least 10 homeless shelters or support services within a 1 mile square radius of the CID already.
Yeah, a lot of the shelters are down there. And just to play devil's advocate, something this size, 500 beds, that's close to the services that already exist downtown. I mean, the industrial district, isn't that kind of the only place that could fit something like that?
It's really hard to say right now. I don't know what other plots of land could be available for lease, but for whatever reason, Dow Constantine chose this piece of land. And the CID, along with Soto, and it's going to impact Pioneer Square, a lot of the business owners there and neighbors are just outraged because they were consulted, or not consulted in many cases, last minute. And they're just hearing about this. And that's become sort of Dow's playbook with his health through housing homeless hotels that have been coming into communities like Redmond and Kirkland as well. The playbook has essentially been, King County buys the property, the announcement comes, then right after that, protests erupt because the community is saying the same thing. We weren't told until after the fact. And that's the key piece here. The CID, other surrounding communities are saying they just weren't consulted. Why not? And they're not getting engagement from Dow Constantine right now. And I've tried numerous times to reach out to his office, and they're essentially choosing not to comment on this.
You did get a chance to confront Mayor Bruce Harrell about it, and he kind of gave you the brush off like this isn't a Seattle problem. Is that fair? And in fact, I'll play the clip here.
The community's really concerned about this new homeless shelter coming into Soto. Right. How come they weren't consulted before you green-lighted this?
Well, that's a leading question, what we call in law, and that's based on facts that are not in evidence, as we say in law. So this is a county project, and I believe they did some amount of outreach and research and talking to communities, and I know that they will continue to do that. So,
is there anything you could do to stop this from coming in? Because that's what they want. They want a moratorium.
So again, it's a county project, and so I'm very confident that they will work with the community, listen to the community, and work with the community, and we'll continue to do that as well. I mean, I think we have a history of making sure that we are trying to, and particularly in the Chinatown International District, trying to uplift all boats. I mean, that's what this is about today. That's why we're here, looking at our small business recovery efforts, what we're doing with the federal government. So that project, again, I believe intended to house the homeless. I think everyone wants to do. I look forward to the continued outreach that I'm sure the county will do, and we'll do it as well.
I mean, did you feel like he was just shirking responsibility?
Well, in fairness, I have tried to reach out to Mayor Bruce Harrell's office numerous times prior to that encounter. So I sort of caught him off guard at a breakfast last week. But basically what the mayor said was that it's the county's problem. He is aware of what's going on. And I want to be very clear. For the record, he did sign off on it. When this release came out in March, his quote is clearly on the webpage supporting this initiative. So the question now for the mayor is, what can the city do? What can he do to potentially, at the very least, put a pause on this? There's some talk about potentially zoning. Permits haven't been pulled yet, so the mayor could potentially put a stop to that. And again, the CID is recognizing that this could be a done deal. All they're asking for right now is some input and a moratorium, a pause, so they can discuss it and talk about issues like public safety. What's the plan for that? Maybe we need more money for the community as well to prepare for this. None of that has been done. And for now, at least public officials are saying that outreach is starting again after the fact. And the problem is for the CID and other surrounding communities, the shelter is supposed to open this fall.
Well, exactly. It's like, well, this is obviously a done deal, and now we're going to reach out to you. And that community or any neighborhood has every right in the world to be concerned about the public safety concerns that come along with the transient population. I mean, if we're being realistic, they exist, and the International District has already had a ton of issues with this. So you go down to this rally. Were you surprised at how many people were there?
Yeah, it was packed. And what I was really surprised about was the fact that most of the people there were the elders. And I think a lot of people who aren't in Chinatown, when you're an outsider, you think of Chinatown as a place to get some great dim sum or pick up some trinkets. But there's actually a vibrant community there. And there are actually a lot of seniors who call that place home, low income, who don't speak English. And that was the key. For the first time, they actually at the rally brought in Cantonese translators because that's the dominant dialect out there, along with multiple other languages. The CID is not just Chinatown, it's also Little Saigon, the Vietnamese community, as well as Japantown. So there's so many different languages. There needed to be, again, according to the organizers of this rally, more time for outreach, more community input, and none of that apparently happened. So a lot of the seniors had a chance to speak out for the first time at this rally, and they were absolutely outraged, especially at the public officials, the city council members like Tammy Morales, who's supposed to be representing them. She has been nowhere, they say, along with King County Council member Joe McDermott, who actually sponsored this shelter. He also represents Chinatown. He's also been nowhere. So essentially, these public officials right now, who are Democrats, are being accused of only showing up when they want a photo op, but when Chinatown actually needs them, they are MIA.
Well, and that's what's so egregious about this. Even Bruce Harrell has used Chinatown as, I don't want to say necessarily a photo op, but he's been down there, painting over graffitied walls, talking about how, they're going to work to keep the open air drug markets and stolen good markets out of there. And to see the images that you captured of these elderly Asian American individuals who are holding up signs with some of these politicians and their faces crossed out, like vote them out of office. What message do you think that sends to the progressives and the Democrats in power who claim to care about communities of color like that one?
I truly believe that the CID, the vast majority of the CID and the Asian American community is starting to lose trust and faith in their Democratic elected officials. Look, the vast majority of Asian Americans and the CID, they have traditionally, historically voted Democrat, but they're at this point right now that they need anyone, and they're going to align with anyone, including Republicans, who will step up to back them at this point. Chinatown, once again, feels like they've always had to fight alone. They're the minority group that's kind of caught in the middle. We all know, Brandi, in the media world, when they talk about quote unquote diversity, it's usually black and white. Okay, then Hispanic, then Asians are last. And this, again, according to Chinatown, they're calling this a social justice issue. They're asking, where's the social justice for them? Where are all these progressive Democratic officials who stood for BLM and every other social justice movement? Where are they right now when the Asian American community needs them?
I thought it was interesting that King County Republican Party sent a few folks there. Do you think that was just them seizing the opportunity? Or, I mean, you heard them speak. Did it feel sincere that they wanted to be there and step up?
First of all, that was totally impromptu. I talked to one of the Republican officials. They said they simply heard about this. They decided to show up. They asked one of the organizers to take the mic and kind of share where they stood. So this was just kind of all fluid. And I was absolutely stunned to see the King County Republican Party officials there. On the flip side of that, I was stunned to see not a single Democratic Party official there to support and stand with Chinatown. So for me, it's almost like a slam dunk. If the Democrats simply show up and publicly say, we stand with Chinatown, we're going to walk with you, we're going to work with you to have your voices met, this would be an easy win for Dems. But what this has done is it's created an opening, I believe, for the Republicans, who I believe genuinely want to stand with Chinatown, but they'll also openly say that the Asian American voting bloc is the fastest growing minority voting bloc, not only in Washington state, but in America. They are seizing on this opportunity to potentially take voters away for the next election cycle.
Yeah, and that's fine, and maybe that changes things down the road. But you could have every Republican official in King County there, but they're not the ones in power right now. They're not the ones with the power to do something about the challenges these communities are facing. So after that show of strength and concern from these individuals in Chinatown, have you heard any movement or momentum from Democratic leaders to take a second look at this homeless complex?
No, but I am hearing that there are Chinatown representatives desperately pleading with these Democratic officials to just step up. This is the time because, again, many in the CID, again, they come from all different political stripes, but have traditionally voted Democrat. And these, representatives from the CID are now saying to the Democrats, please stand with us right now. We don't necessarily want to vote Republican, but we're at this crossroads where we have to align with anyone, especially public officials who are willing to fight with us and stand with us publicly.
Yeah. And if you're going to claim up and down that you care about, minority groups and people of color, words are one thing, actions are another. And I really hope that community gets the help it needs, because I don't think that the executive's office is going to back off from this proposal. And so what are they going to do on the back end to make sure that things are safe?
Yeah,
Jonathan
along with
Choe,
Republican officials, I want to say one last point, along with Republican officials who are jumping in on this, there's also now law enforcement unions that are looking at this very carefully and seeing this as an opportunity to stand up for the Chinatown community.
Yeah, and I hope that's what it's about. I don't want the Chinatown community or the International District, whatever, I know people call it both, to become kind of a political pawn where people say, oh, they're a big voting base, like let's get in there and show that we care. I hope that people really see what they're dealing with and what they have been dealing with for a long time as it pertains to crime and make an effort to fix things. So Jonathan Choe, great work as always. Really, really, to me, I found the images you captured really heartwarming because, I know that it's unfortunate that these people have to come out like that to have their voices heard, but the fact that you have a community that's willing to do that and stand up and push back, I think is really great.
Yeah, this is the last line of defense. They say they've had enough. They say they've been victimized so many times by elected officials and bad public policy that has impacted Chinatown. They feel like they're getting squeezed into a box and their backs are up against the wall. So this is it. They're going to hold the line right here.
Great. And Jonathan Choe, one of the only journalists in Seattle who's paying attention to this issue. So thank you for coming on to talk about it.
Thanks, Brandi, for amplifying the story.
Now, I did reach out to the city of Seattle and King County to get comments on all of this. I have not heard back from the city of Seattle yet, but I did hear back from the Department of Community and Human Services for King County. And they put up a blog post about this, and they did say that they met with the rally organizers last week. And they are going to continue to meet with members of the community as the planning process moves forward. They also say they're working to correct misinformation that's being spread about this project. I did ask them what specifically is the misinformation that they're working to clear up. But look, regardless of what the city or the county feels like they've done in this instance, clearly the community members don't think it's enough. Clearly, the community members don't feel informed enough about what's going on. We can all agree, all common sense people can agree that you need shelters like the one that they're going to build, places to get people inside, places to get people services. But you have to communicate with the people around those areas to let them know what your plan is, if anything, to deal with the crime that is going to come up as a result. Those communities deserve that. And when you're in a city like Seattle, when you have progressive leadership that says over and over and over how much it prioritizes communities of color, cares about communities of color, you have to actually have action behind those words. The previous segment was brought to you in partnership with Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org.